Okay, hi everybody and welcome. My name is Carol Glasser and I am a part of the Animals and Society section of the American Sociological Association. We, along with the Animals and Society Institute, organize the Animals and Society Colloquium Series. Through this series, we bring one speaker in about every month during the academic year to talk about various topics in the field of human animal studies. We're all really glad to have you here today. Some announcements before I'm going to turn this over to Liz Herkey in a minute to do introductions for this talk, but I just want to make a couple announcements. One announcement is that I'm just going to pop in the chat when we get started a link to our next colloquium. So we're going to have a colloquium next month, and that colloquium is called Individual Responsibility, Dietary Change in the Animal Agriculture Industry with Dr. Laura Donna Loy. So I'll pop that in the chat, keep that on your calendar, and we'll also put some links in the chat to where you can sign up to get on a mailing list to know about future colloquium series. As I said, I am a member of the Animals and Society section of the ASA. You need to be a member of the ASA to be a part of that section, but if you're interested in knowing more about it, please send me an email. But everybody here could be engaged with ASI, the Animals and Society Institute. Animals and Society Institute has a lot of great resources and a lot of great stuff going on. So we'll drop some links in the chat to how you can get involved with them too. So if you aren't already a part of ASI, I encourage you to join. So with that, I'm going to kick this over to Liz Herkey. And Liz will tell you a little bit about ASI and introduce you to today's speaker.
Thanks, Carol, and hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Liz Herkey with the Animals and Society Institute, and I also want to welcome you to today's colloquium. And today we have a distinguished speaker, Dr. Lemelin, who will discuss some of his work on human interactions with insects. But before we jump into the program, I want to tell you a little bit more about the series in case this is your first time joining. And the series is the brainchild of Carol Glasser, and it is a joint project, as Carol mentioned, between the Animals and Society section of the ASA and the Animals and Society Institute. So as Carol said, if you are a sociologist and you haven't already, we really hope that you will consider joining ASA and joining the Animals and Society section. Now, for those of you not familiar with the Animals and Society Institute, ASI is dedicated to furthering the field of human animal studies as it concerns the complex relationship between humans and other animals. ASI has 2 managed academic journals, a book series on human animal studies, and loads of resources for scholars, researchers, faculty, mental health professionals. These and more resources can be found on our website, including a database of HAS-related academic programs. And as Carol mentioned, we have a bunch of links that we will put in the chat for you. Our HAS program director, Gala Argent, produces a monthly report that is chock full of information about the field. This includes general news, conferences, publications, calls for papers, job opportunities, grant funding. So we encourage everyone, non-academics or academics of any discipline, to sign up for the ASI HAS report. It really is a valuable resource, and we hope that you'll check it out along with the other resources on the website. So on to today's talk. And just as a reminder for anyone who's joined us, Carol first mentioned this, Carol will be monitoring the chat. So if you prefer to ask a question in that way, you can do so. And we will hold off on all questions until after the talk. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Harvey Lemelin. Dr. Lemelin will be talking with us about entomotourism, that is, insect-related ecotourism. For example, visiting monarch butterfly sanctuaries, and entomotourism as a potential form of interspecies education for multispecies flourishing. Dr. Lemelin's goal for this presentation is to help move entomotourism from the recreational margins to the mainstream of research on tourism in human animal studies. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Lemelin has showcased human interactions with insects in recreation and tourism settings. His findings have been published in several interdisciplinary journal articles and in the book, The Management of Insects in Recreation and Tourism. a fervent proponent of insect pollinators. Dr. Lemelin and his family have converted most of their yard into a pollinator garden. Dr. Lemelin, thank you so much for being with us today, and I turn the presentation over to you.
All right. Thank you for those kind introductions. I want to apologize for the organizers regarding my math dyslexia, and then not being able to answer a couple of easy questions. I'll just blame it on the French. If you're detecting an accent, sometimes when I get nervous, my French Canadian accent will kick in. All right. So what I'd like to do is I was trained in sociology, and so I'm going to disclose who I am and why I find this research essential and important. And so I'll just jump into that. So I'm presenting to you from Pass Lake today on the shores of Kichigami, of Lake Superior, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation and the Fort William First Nation within the Robinson Superior Treaty. This is a process that we often use in Canada, just as a recognition of the Indigenous people that we do here, that live here, and that whose land we reside on. So what do? I work and teach in research in the School of Outdoor Recreation, Parks and Tourism at Lakehead University. And for leisure, I maintain and I propagate pollinator gardens, which is much at the displeasure of many of my neighbors. So today I was hoping to have a butterfly outfit. I don't, so what I'm going to do is wear my special outfit that I got when I did my research on the melipona, the stingless bees of the Yucatan, and I was given this hat. So I'm going to wear the hat just to go into full prop mode. All right, why insects? Well, despite predating birds, reptiles, mammals, and humans along evolutionary scales, insects, the elder and largest component of the animal kingdom, have historically even been perceived as unwanted aliens, damaging or competing for our resources, and in some cases, negatively impacting our leisure and tourism activities. Why insects? Because the joke is at conferences is for every polar bear biologist that you have at a wildlife management conference, for every polar bear you have about 28 polar bear biologists, and for the millions and millions of insects you have one entomologist. And while it has become to more recent attention that insects are facing extinction, declines, a process called death by 1,000 cuts by the Xerces societies through pollution, habitat modification, agricultural intensification, deforestation, insecticides, and of course, urbanization. Why insects? Well, they provide a host of pollination, seed dispersal, waste decomposition, soil nutrient recycling, crucial roles in food chains. I always have to remind birders that, without insects, most birds aren't going to do well. They serve as bioindicators. They provide social cultural roles in gardening, entomotourism, entomophagy. Yes, there is a multi-billion-dollar industry on the consumption and eating of insects. They are part of art forms. Yet, because even though with these three fundamental components that I just spoke of, I still feel that I have to validate and justify this research on and with insects and leisure and tourism settings. So what I want to try to do today is provide an overview of human encounters with insects in leisure and tourism settings and showcase how these encounters can be unsettling and rewarding. And they can be educational and hopefully transformative for visitors, educators, managers, and researchers. So moving it from the so-called fringe, the recreational fringe, to the mainstream. The other approach that I do with my research and my teaching is the concept of responsibility, because I've had the great pleasure of working with and for various Indigenous communities and First Nations throughout Canada and in the US. I always felt that we have a kinship with animals, and so there's a responsibility to research, to publish, and to educate. Why? Because when I first started doing this research and moved away from grizzlies and polar bears, which was my doctoral dissertation, some people told me that nobody cares about insects, insects are stupid, and it's a kiss of death for your career because you're going from a charismatic megafauna to animals that have no charisma. So I usually don't do well when I'm told what to do. So I went out and tried to disprove these individuals. I also have a strong allure and interest in insects that goes right back to my youth. And so I've worked with communities, I've published with Indigenous researchers on some of these topics, and also try to remind that there are different perspectives and different approaches and ontologies when it comes to insects. The declines that I've noted earlier also requires researchers to move away from just researching a topic to advocacy. And I know in sociology that's not frowned upon, but I also work a lot with natural scientists that still frown upon the concept of advocates. Some people have actually said that I'm not a researcher, I'm just an advocate. I don't think that there's any problem with advocacy or acknowledging one's responsibility to challenge, to advocate, and transform. And here is a picture of one of our yards in Thunder Bay, providing pollinator habitats and also insect habitats, and co-sharing our resources and co-sharing these resources with various animals, insects, birds, mammals, bears, deer, and various other creatures that come and visit our yard. The other one is a concept of kinship. So the concept of kinship means that we recognize our affiliations with animals, and because humanity, according to some ancient Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee legends, humanity lost the ability to talk to animals. So we now have to, because we have the inability to do so, and we have transformed the planet, we have to speak and advocate on their behalf. They are also, insects are some of the most beautiful creatures on the planet, and one of the most mesmerizing. On the bee here is a Melipona bee, and it's a stingless bee of the Yucatan. And of course, these are damselflies, and just how beautiful they are. All right, what is entomotourism? Basically, it's humans deliberately seeking out insects, which dates back millennia. So this is not a fringe concept. It's not a new approach. It dates back millennia from with some people in Japan seeking out fireflies, people seeking out interactions, deliberately seeking out interactions with dragonflies, to the ancient Mayans worshiping and seeking interactions with butterflies. It's been called entomological tourism, entomological ecotourism, human insect encounters, and insect tourism. There is still no consensus on the term entomotourism, and some of the challenges are associated with researchers coming in from the natural sciences and not really attuned to or recognizing the research that's been done in the social sciences. A more concrete definition is encounters with the purpose of observing, feeding, touching, photographing, sometimes collecting, or otherwise interacting with insects in captive environments, such as butterfly pavilions, insectariums, apiaries, and non-captive environments, such as protected areas, sanctuaries, where glowworm caves in Australia and New Zealand, or firefly outings throughout North America. Pollinator gardens, whether they're on private property or located in municipal areas. Activities may include various types of interactions, from collecting identification to attending festivals focused on insects, festivals in citizen science, to entomophagy. So not only interacting with the animals, but sometimes eating them or eating their byproducts. Participation in entomotourism involves millions of people around the world visiting parks and sanctuaries, visiting 250 insectariums, butterfly pavilions and pollinator parks. Visiting, and that's, of course, all of these numbers are pre-pandemic, visiting and interacting in various types of apitourism. What is apitourism? It's tourism related with honeybees. So whether it's apitherapy or just visiting a honeybee colony that is being manufactured, or sorry, that is being farmed and protected by people raising them, attending 107 festivals and special events, volunteering for the 50 citizens science project dedicated solely to insects, as I pointed out earlier, entomophagy, and sometimes buying handicrafts made out of insects or made of insects. So here you just see, you got the glowworm caves, you got a festival on ladybugs, and a showcase a few years ago, I believe at the Chicago Museum, The Romance of Ants. The key component of tourism and entomotourism are visibility. So if people are paying to deliberately interact and see these animals, will they be able to see them? Will they be able to see them in predictable and safe environments? What is the proximity to the animals? Because many of these animals are very small, so you need to get quite close. Or can you use various types of technologies to showcase them? Are the animals active? And can people view them in a from a safe perspective? In some instances, the product of insects like honey from certain types of bees can be incorporated into these experiences. And I'll provide an example of that. And here's a showcase of very popular entomotourism attractions in many insectariums. These are leafcutter ants. And you can basically set up displays where people can see them as they harvest leaves, bring them back to their nests, incorporate the mushrooms into them, and then have a breakdown. The mushrooms break down the leaves into a food source, and the ants live in a relative symbiotic harmony with the fungi, the leaves, and their colonies. Research now has shown that individuals deliberately seek out interactions with charismatic microfauna. And yes, I had used that term to kind of challenge those individuals. The most popular ones being butterflies, second one being honeybees, third ones would be fireflies, and fourth will be dragonflies. So there are people that seek out insects to deliberately interact with them, or it could be part of a broader tourism strategy, such as a visit to a butterfly garden or insectarium. In this case, this is my son on a trip to Newfoundland, and we stopped at an insectarium. And he's holding a walking stick. The tasting of edibles at farms like grasshoppers in Osaka in Mexico. What are the benefits of entomotourism? Saying that promoting greater awareness and understanding of the importance of insects, providing transformative experiences, fostering a greater understanding and tolerance of these animals, providing economic benefits to host communities and host nations. I also like to point out that many butterfly pavilions are for-profit institutions. So if there is no money to be made and no one was attracted to insects, then why are some of these places making millions of dollars every year and hosting millions of visitors every year? Last, some places generate funding sources for the development of species and habitat protection or sustainability, so continuing the protection of some of these sanctuaries. It's also very important to point out that this is not, entomotourism is not a new phenomenon. Insects have appealed and have been incorporated into various religious perspectives, into poetry, into art, into lore, and into garden. So these are some of the art forms. The picture of the butterfly was one that I found when we were visiting the Yucatan, and it's from a Mayan, it's from an Aztec temple, and there was a butterfly on it. At the bottom are Egyptian hieroglyphics. The allure of fireflies as a magical, transformative species has been part of legends for millennia. The allure of butterflies as because of their various transformation and potentially as the souls of the living or the souls of the departing has been incorporated in various religious perspective or spiritual perspectives. What's great about doing this research in the 21st century is the amazing technology that is available, from apps to photographic equipment to the great videos of Life in the Undergrowth with David Attenborough, the guides that are out there for identifications, the research that is being done. And I do have jumping spiders here on the side. I know that they're not insects. I know that they're arachnids, but the research and the beauty and the intelligence of jumping spiders has provided a great attraction to many people. In some cases, you can use the technology, so it's transformative. In the past, when we were going out to dragonfly symposiums, you were capturing specimen. They were captured, they were put in envelopes, and then they would die, and then you would be able to identify them. Some people have issues with that, especially people coming in from birding perspectives. So now you can identify the animal, you capture them, you identify them, you photograph them, you GPS them, and then you release them. These are all great technologies and approaches to these animals. Some of the other benefits that are coming in from butterfly pavilions and butterfly ranches. Well, the benefits are salaries. Some, as I said, you make profits off of them. Some of them sell entry fees, books, souvenirs, and specimens. They've helped to establish protected area, and they educate. So not only do you have the pavilions, but many of them use what they call butterfly ranches in developing nations or in South America and in Africa. And here what happens is monarchs, or sorry, not monarchs in general, but butterflies are raised in general, and then they're sent to the butterfly pavilions and they're released as adults. So there is a circular economy based upon that. In terms of some of the most popular sanctuaries dedicated to butterflies, since I'm presenting from Turtle Island or North America, I will discuss the monarch butterfly sanctuaries in Mexico, in the Sierra Madres of Mexico, and also because of their popularity, because many of our monarchs that are here now are started to migrate south, and they're going to eventually end up down there. And then what's even more remarkable is in the summertime or in the springtime, we have a migration composed of 3 to 4 generations of monarchs that come back and migrate as far from the Sierra Madres of Mexico right back to here on the shorelines and north of Lake Superior. These sanctuaries were created in 2006 as biospheres, implemented as World Heritage Sites in 2008. So you have that tourism brand that helps to attract certain types of tourists. And the reason for that is to protect the overwintering colonies of the monarch butterflies in Michoacan and Mexico. I have been down there. I've seen the congregations, and I'll show you pictures of that. Here are some of the more popular ones. Sierra Cinque, El Rosario is the most popular one. It's one of the first ones established, La Mesa, and most of my research was done in the most isolated one at the bottom here is Cerro Pelon. Okay. It does attract thousands of people annually, many people from the US, many people from Canada, some Europeans. But what is interesting here is a bit different than some other tourism places that have been and attractions is it attracts thousands of Mexicans every year to these places. And yes, this is what they come to see. Millions, if not billions, of monarchs congregating. Basically what they do is they congregate along big trees, try to stay warm, have some basic nutrients, stay hydrated until they migrate and they leave the Sierra Madres in the early spring and start the migration back northward, a migration that will consist of several generations. Since the establishment of these sanctuaries, the World Wildlife Fund has been very present in this. It does the counts. It hires locals to do guidance. It does provide pathways and guided outings that way. This is probably one of the most, when I look at this monarch picture, is one of the most remarkable moments of my life, is hearing the sounds that a million monarch wings make. And this is something that cannot be captured visually. As I had pointed out, the various monarch sanctuaries provide their own interpretation. People have to pay to get on site, and there are various type of approaches, from El Rosario, which has visitor interpreter centers, restaurants, various other facilities, to down at the bottom here, Cerro Pelon is a gate. And basically what Cerro Pelon is, you don't hike, is you take horses to go up and see the monarch congregations or aggregations over there. So various types of infrastructures catering to various types of tourists. The other important issue that you have with a migrating species such as monarchs is our recognition of the importance of their nursery plant of milkweed, swamp, and common, which are the most common and by the way, I'm talking here of the eastern migration of monarchs. They all depend on the nursery plant of milkweed, but they also need other flowering plants to provide them with nectar and pollen, mostly nectar, for their migration. This is what we've ended up calling the importance of the Milky Weed Way. So providing nursery plants, food plants, sanctuaries, so they can migrate both north and south and north. This will bring us back to the importance of creating and maintaining pollinator habitats. Apiaries with honeybees, they're really important. They're a big industrial complex. They're very important in recreational approaches. People keep apiaries often just for recreational purposes. And there are many museums strictly dedicated to honeybees. I'm not trying to glance over this, but I've never been to these museums. Of course, I've been to a couple of B&Bs with apiaries, and I've learned about the management of these animals. But since I haven't been to them, I'm just going to jump into the places where I've been. So when I did the research on monarchs, I was told about stingless bees, Melipona bees, and basically a type of bee that doesn't sting, that produces honey, a much lower ability to produce as a different type of honey, and a type of bee that was very important to the Mayan people. And what happened through colonization is honeybees, you can make more money off of them. They're easier to keep. They produce more honey. So the the Melipona lost their significance. Fortunately, through some research and some private not-for-profit organizations and some advocacy by Mayan people and some Mexican advocates, these eusocial bees found throughout the Yucatan Peninsula were brought back from the brink of extinction. And I don't mean extinction that they're going to disappear from nature. It's just our understanding of extinction as a form of horticulture. What makes these bees unique is they have no sting. So if you've ever had the misfortune of being stung by a honeybee or some bumblebees or wasps, this one doesn't have a stinger. No one really knows why these bees don't have a stinger, but they lost it through time. One of the Mayan legends is that they lost it because the goddess wanted it that way. They can still bite. They are still descendants of ants, and they can carry a nasty bite if they are in defense and they feel threatened. This is how Melipona bees or stingless bees are raised in semi-permanent structures located throughout villages, universities, and even in some cases in the De Silva Hotel in Tulum. Typically composed of thatch roofs providing shelter and shade, 4 pillars for suspension, and a water moat to deter certain types of ants. Hives range from 12 individuals to 300. So they're much smaller than the beehives that we're familiar with. I'm just going to glance over this very quickly. the Melipona had important significance to the Mayan people. They were one of the only type of sweeteners produced artificially by indigenous people in North America prior to the introduction of honeybees. They are a significant component of Mayan lore, and it's regarded, the bees and the honey are regarded as a gift from the gods. The honey also has important medicinal value. They do provide wax and resin and sweeteners in mead. What's interesting with the resuscitation of the Mayan, with the Mayan people and the stingless bees, is that this role has been taken over largely by Mayan women. So they've created cooperatives, and some of the honey is being sold. It's a bit challenging to sell the honey and to transport the honey, because the honey is not technically defined as honey, because typical North Americans, we define honey as this fabricated thing by introduced species, and the local, what is produced by national and local bees, is not considered honey. Sorry, it's very complicated. What I'm saying is basically Melipona, you cannot transport pure Melipona honey. It's considered against the law, at least in Canada. And that was about 5 years ago. So what you can do is you produce other products and beauty products from the honey. One of the most remarkable things, because I've been to apiaries, is how different Melipona honeybees are. So it provides proximity, visibility, and activity. The guards will check you out. You can't open it. You can smell the pollen. You can smell the honey. You can see it, and you can hear them actively manage their hive, and quite honestly being irritated. You can taste the honey. If you're very fortunate, you can taste some of the pollen. Some of the guards and some of the workers may land on you, so you can kind of interact with them. And for somebody that has interacted with various types of bees, the gentleness of the Melipona bee truly makes it, to me at least, evidence that they are a gift provided by the gods. And also you can discuss the legends and the revitalization of this approach. So this is just a picture where they're kept in a hotel, and the Meliponia is off to the side, and here you see signage and interpretation. And sometimes if you're interested, you could basically support your own beehive. Okay. The other one that I quickly wanted to talk about is fireflies, found in temperate and tropical climates throughout the world. Fireflies are very susceptible since they spend most of their lives in the ground. They need good soil quality and humid soils. So that is a key component of them. They also, some species, some of the females do not fly. So tall grasses are really important. And because of this, they are in precipitous declines outside of their sanctuaries. They're also found in aquatic areas, and some of the challenges associated to the elimination of their aquatic habitat is also detrimental to them. The luminescence has inspired poets, storytellers, artisans, photographers, researchers, museums, enthusiasts around the globe. There are still guided outings in Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Thailand, and throughout some parts of the continental US. And this is time lapse, of course, of the photography, but this is what people come to be enticed, this magical phenomenon and spiritual phenomenon of basically male, sometimes females, but mostly male fireflies lighting up and trying to attract female fireflies. Quickly, some of the research that was done in Mexico, the Santa Clara, Piedra Cantera, Canteco del Bosque, and Bosque Esmeralda. I apologize for my Spanish. Some of the sanctuaries basically is you have parking areas, you're guided by a guide for about a 2-hour walk at night in the forest to see the fireflies. That the interpretation, as I pointed out in my articles, ranges from very good to basically very arbitrary and just a basic overview. One of the most proud concepts I've been affiliated with is developing a wildlife viewing strategy for fireflies and glowworms at Grandfather Mountain, an area, a protected area located in North Carolina. And basically throughout the COVID pandemic, what we did is, what would you do if you could produce or develop a wildlife viewing industry? And I said, you got to protect the resource and their habitat. So we implemented proactive strategies, pre-visit permits systems, permits with a fee on site, basically guided outings, and with a time limit. And then a pre-site visitation package, or post-site visitation package to do a follow-up. What's really unique about this area, and I've never seen glowworms before. Basically, glowworms are the same. They're a gnat type of fly that uses bioluminescence to attract victims into its web so it can eat them. I really apologize for that rough entomological discussion. I hope there's no entomologists here. I'm just trying to quickly go over this. And the transformative experience that led me on this new road away from grizzlies and polar bears to dragonflies, and one human being, two human beings that are really affiliated, which is my wife and my son here, the little boy in orange holding a net, is I went on a dragonfly outing. I fell in love. I was mesmerized by the big eyes, by the ferocity of these creatures that can eat, mate, and fly. I was interested by watching grown men and women running around in the field and having farmers look at them and going, what the heck is going on here? I've since worked with a couple of Japanese colleagues and understanding how important dragonflies were and remain in Japan, and just the beauty and the ability to be able to capture these creatures and release them. So I participated in a couple of dragonflies, and this is the one that started the whole entomotourism thing. It was basically a citizen science research project. Since then, people have sent me stuff. A couple of colleagues went down during the sabbatical to Africa, and they were showing me how people basically are really fascinated by dung beetles and how important they are. In the article we wrote, I didn't write it, but it was showcased a chapter on how you can use insects in areas where you don't have big mammals or a lot of birds. So they were showcasing the ferocity of the tiger beetles, the beauty of them. And the other one is trying to diversify your opportunities. And people are interested if you can provide good interpretation on not only the big five, but the small five. Right. The other necessity of this research as a sociologist is challenging anthropomorphism. So there is this belief that we prefer creatures that are most human-like. Certain types of mammals, certain types of animals deemed charismatic, animals deemed to be intelligent. And this has been promoted not only through research, but through environmental groups, tourism, media, and managers. I just want to point out that if that's the case, then fishing, which is still quite big in North America, and birding, which is the largest wildlife tourism industry in the world, a lot of birds don't look like people, a lot of fish don't look like people. So what's the rationality with anthropomorphism? I'm not saying that it doesn't occur. Of course, we have cats. I understand the allure of that, but it's not as simplistic as anthropomorphism has made it out to be. My biggest pet peeve is entomophobia. How researchers have said that most people, if not all people, have a general universal dislike or hatred of insects, often reinforced by the sensationalist and negative media, the pest industry, pesticides, and researchers. My own research has suggested with Indigenous people and with and doing countless of interviews and surveys, says it's not that simple. It doesn't address social cultural nuances. There are interspecies difference. People love bees, hate wasps, love butterflies, hate moths. And sometimes people are just apathetic. I don't care about the insects as long as they don't bother me.
I'm just going to interrupt quickly. We want to leave some time for question and answer. So I was going to let you know, I left a message in the chat, but I'm guessing you didn't see it because your screen's up. Hopefully we can wrap up in a couple minutes so we can have a couple minutes left for questions.
The other thing too is it's not just controlled by media, is really what influences our perspective regarding insects is early childhood interactions. Just going to jump over some of these. So there has been animals have agency, sentience, and intelligence. I can recap that if people are interested in it. So it's not just a few individuals operating on the recreational fringe. It's a multi-million-dollar industry attracting millions of people around the world, providing sustainable development, greater interest in insect conservation, the establishment of sanctuaries and protected areas, and encouraging greater intelligence. This is a research project that I do with my students. They have to select an insect and develop that as their clan throughout a 12-week course on interpretation. Talked about homegrown national parks, provide pollinator gardens, so moving away from just the research into activism. And the other one is giving voice to bees and to insects. All right, so this is another, I don't have many pictures of monarchs. This is monarchs obviously using some water and hydrating. I'd like to thank everybody. And for me, as a French Canadian, I do have influences from France. There are only one real monarch in the world, and that's the monarch butterflies, the pollination princesses, and all of our 6 and 8-legged kins. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So now we'll turn to Q&A, if you want to take the presentation off the screen. So if anybody has a question, you can raise your hand and I will call on you, or you can pop your question into the chat and I can moderate it from there. I do have a question to start with. Has there been any research on the impact that visiting places and entomotourism has on the person who experiences it? Obviously, it had a really big impact on you. It changed your course of research. I just wondered what the research out there was saying. Like, do people care more about efforts to help insects after they visit these places?
A really good question. I'll go with the success cases. I'll talk about the monarch butterflies, especially as North Americans, as we feel part of one continent. Had a transformative experience because you can tell people going, if you really care about these animals, here's what you can do. You can grow milkweed in your yard. You can provide them with various flowers at various times and provide them with them to migrate and find nutrients along their migration route. That one has been the most automatic one where people have implemented into activity. The firefly one has been more challenging because people always say, well, I see a decline, I don't see them anymore, and going, well, you need to leave the leaves on the ground and you need to provide perhaps not as much grass in your backyard and not have every single aspect of your yard lit up. That one requires a lot more transformative behaviors at home. So the monarch is a success case. The firefly one is a challenging one. I do recognize before people say this, that there are rules regarding bylaws and municipal rules in the US and Canada that may prohibit some of these activities. When I first started doing the monarch stuff, it was against the law in Ontario to have milkweed in your yard. Fortunately, it's no longer the case.
Does anyone else have a question? I have a question in the chat. It's from a couple questions. Is there any work, any of this going on for ladybugs?
So ladybug is another one. We could have I see Ken is here, so we could have a big argument on what is charisma. Is that attributed to the animals? But people, when I did the interviews, people tend to love ladybugs. Not the introduced ladybugs that we have in the US and Canada, but they tend to love ladybugs, or to our friends from Britain, ladybirds. There has not been much in terms of tourism, but I know that there has been some research done with gardening policies and stuff like that, garden approaches, because they're really, really good at getting rid of aphids.
We have another comment question from Tom. Ecotourism in many ways has proven harmful to animals and their habitats. Is there any danger to insects and commodifying visits to experience them? A human intrusion that takes away their ability to thrive without that human imposition?
Yes. Because I can see the similarities. I can see the similarities with polar bear tourism and grizzly bear tourism and cougar tourism, puma tourism, or wolf tourism, is if you don't respect the wildlife and make it about them, you need to protect your attraction and protect their habitat. Once that idea is lost and gone, it's got to be about for profit. It's got to be about what viewers want. It's got to be about the pictures and the selfies that they need. Then yes, the animals can become threatened, and you can actually make it worse because now you're bringing in visitors into their sanctuaries, and you're creating trails, you're creating viewing platforms which are transformative if it's not done properly. And this is what I was trying to say to Grandfather Mountain: is you got to cap it and stick with your cats, with your numbers, and do not allow people to walk through the forest. There's no need to walk through the forest. You can see the fireflies from the roadway, which was built in the 1950s. It does have an impact. If the resource is not number one and the attraction is not put number one, then you will have detrimental impacts over time. I'm not even talking about climate change and the challenges associated to that.
Ken?
Yes, I don't want to go before these other folks, but yeah, so I was just visiting in Maine, this botanical garden that has a butterfly setup. And I was informed when we walked in there that a bird or two had gotten in there and destroyed all the butterflies. And so when the woman told me that they at this facility receive shipments of butterflies every month. So my question is about the monarch butterfly. If indeed these butterflies are being produced in a kind of facility and then shipped, is that a technological solution to the butterfly problem? We've been trying to set up a milkweed garden here, and we have, I would say, 20 milkweed plants now, but we don't have monarch butterflies. Anyway, can you just address the monarch butterfly situation, solutions to it?
Okay, I'm not an expert in terms of butterfly pavilions and butterfly ranches. So what I'm aware of is that one of the most popular species would be blue morpho, and many of them, yes, have the youngs being raised elsewhere and then shipped over. I'm not sure that they're doing that with monarchs. It certainly wasn't the case about 10 years ago with the butterfly pavilions. When I was talking about the monarchs is more the natural components and the changing philosophies. It's probably one of our greatest success stories in North America, bringing awareness of the importance of milkweed and monarch butterflies. But there have been transformation of where people see them as their property, their pets, and their livestock, and other species that are detrimental to them should be wiped out. But the one species that is the most detrimental to monarchs is human beings, and it has no responsibility. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, Ken, but I'm not sure. I know you can raise monarchs in captivity, but painted ladies are the ones that are the biggest issues. There have been issues with raising butterflies in captivities and releasing them for weddings and stuff like that, and introduce diseases and challenges with that.
Yeah. So my question was, if indeed they can produce monarch butterflies, do those butterflies enter into this migratory, multi-generational program that allows their product regeneration, or are those just sort of a momentary glimpse of a monarch? I mean, is this a solution to the decline in monarchs and other butterflies and moths? I mean, I notice now when we drive on a country road, there's no moths or butterflies hitting the windshield anymore.
This is a really big question in terms of the semi-captivity and raising monarchs in captivity. There has been some concerns and issues about introducing It's like any horticulture. You really need to control your environments and you're raising them. There have been some people that said we're now introducing this, certain pet or certain diseases into monarch populations. The research is still relatively young. We've only really started doing this for about 20 to 30 years of raising monarchs or raising them in semi-captivity. I think the long-term implications is it would be best if we left them alone, but provided more sanctuaries and more monarch food sources and nursery plants along their migratory route. I don't think that us trying to doctor these situations is going to be sustainable on the long term.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a comment in the chat with a question. Jessica tells us that their daughter recently joined an entomology club through her local 4-H extension offices. And Jessica's wondering, are there other focuses on appealing to children with entomotourism?
I don't know about entomotourism. That was certainly the focus of this discussion. There are citizen science research projects that have been done by the Nature Conservancy. So I'll just name one that we're all familiar with. I'm usually talking with Americans here, American and Canadians. So there are not-for-profits. There's the David Suzuki Foundation in Canada that does bio blitzes and using the apps. So those are certain opportunities to do that. And there are local festivals that have the opportunities to showcase, and naturalist clubs that do outings. So those would be other opportunities.
Chris has a question.
Hi, Harvey. I just wanted to ask a question. I guess I can lower my hand now. One of the things that I personally have been kind of thinking through around this idea of the more than human and insects is this idea that there are many different kinds of insects, mites in particular, that are actually quite healthy on the human body. And they are part of what makes us thrive. And I guess I wonder if you've heard of any sort of kind of entomotourism type linkage with kind of like the biological body and just orienting to, I guess, insects, but other bacteria and things like that would also kind of fit into that realm of, you know, things that are helpful to the body, and we're not kind of existing as humans on our own. Like, part of the reason why we thrive is because of this kind of interconnectedness and this relational aspect, and it's also a caring for ourselves. And in a lot of Indigenous literatures, it's getting at the idea that, you know, we are never separate from our connections and our relationships.
It really depends. When I'm doing a 1 to 2 hour tour with people about dragonflies, I usually don't point out that they have insects living on them or in them. Some people are not aware of that. I usually do it with our students because it does talk about the kinship and the interrelatedness and the tolerance, right? I'm like this intolerance of North Americans that we have towards insects within our house, within our yards, within our recreational yards, within our school grounds, and going, yeah, but you realize that we have these creatures on us, or we're going to start eliminating them at our own detriment. So it really, to answer your question, it depends on the audience. If this is the first time that somebody has come up and wants to learn about insects, then I don't usually point out that they may have many of them on them and their pets. If it's a more advanced or more advanced in people that are willing to consider the issues, then you can talk about the interrelationships.
Thank you.
We have one last question in the chat, and we have about 4 minutes, so I think that we can do it. Robert says, often various parks sponsor bird watching walks. Do you know of any, if any ever have insect walks, not necessarily focusing on the more popular species?
Great question, Robert. I'll try to answer that from a more local perspective. Yes, problem with wildlife viewing tourism, whether it's fishing, ecotourism, people bear viewing or birding, is they often just want to see the species, and the whole ecosystemic discussions are lost. What people have tried to do here with and at the Carton Nature Festival down south is talk about those connections. That bird is really important. It's a warbler. It eats a lot of insects. The same thing with hummingbirds. They don't just drink nectar, they eat insects. So just to try to remind people the interconnection and talking about those insects that may not be popular to people going, but the birds really like to eat them. So to try to show that connection and that tolerance going, you know, when you're outside getting bit by a mosquito or by a black fly or by a gnat, birds and certain mammals and certain reptiles and other insects like to eat them. So it's all part of that food connection. It is done, but only in highly, unfortunately, specialized environments, because ecotourism, as was noted earlier, and wildlife tourism still focuses on species. Like, I want to see that species. I want to see that. And unfortunately, we're starting to see that in firefly tourism. Okay, saw that species. Where's the other one? Where's the other one? Where's the other one? And the interconnections are lost. So that would be a precautionary tale regarding the hyperspecies discussion with the checklist, as we call it, or the lifers in birding.
Thank you very much. So we're 2 minutes before the beginning of the hour, so the next hour. So we are going to end here. I would like to thank very much Dr. Harvey Lemelin for bringing expertise to us today. This was a really interesting talk. I'm definitely going to be talking about this with my students. I know that for sure. And maybe even assigning this lecture as an assignment to introduce them to this idea. So this lecture will be, or colloquium, will be available on video. So everyone who registered, all of you here today, I will be sending you out a message when the recording is available, so you can share this with others who would be interested. And earlier, Liz popped in the chat the link to all of our past colloquium, so you can spend some time scanning through past colloquium as well. And then just as a reminder, we do have our next colloquium on, I need to take a look at it. I popped it in the chat in the beginning, but we have our next colloquium next month, and it will be on October 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you so much, Dr. Lemelin, for the great talk.
Thank you.